Hi, everybody. Welcome to Legends of Philly on PHL 17 Plus. I'm Jason Lee. These are conversations with the biggest names in Philly, and they don't get much bigger than my guest today. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, among some other Hall of Fames as well. He has conquered, newspapers, television, radio. He's written plays, NFL films. He's written countless books. What more can I say? It is the great Ray Didinger, and Ray, it is an honor. Thank you for coming in here.
Pleasure, Jason.
I appreciate it. So before we talk about everything you've done in your great career, you just got back from, a 4-month cruise.
4.5 months,
4.5 months. What's it like being on a boat for 4.5 months?
It was great. It was great. My wife and I had cruised before, but never more than 3 weeks. So the idea of 4.5 months, we weren't quite sure how it was going to feel, and it was wonderful.
Did you get homesick at all?
No. No, we missed our dog.
Okay, of course.
We missed our dog.
Wow, right.
And the grandchildren,
okay,
to be fair. But just the feeling of being away, being free of all responsibility, and just having that sense of liberation was terrific. And seeing a whole part of the world that we had never seen before.
So where'd you go?
We had always wanted to see Australia. We did Australia, we did New Zealand, we did all the islands in the South Pacific, Fiji, Tahiti, all the Hawaiian islands, then around Australia, New Zealand, then up through Indonesia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea. Spent 2 weeks circling Japan, got to see a lot of Japan, then came back across the ocean, did Alaska, and then finally the final stop was Vancouver, and then we came home from Vancouver. So we left January 4th. The Eagles were still playing when we left, and we came back. We got home May 17th.
Now I know, from what I know about you, you've tried to retire, and that wasn't very successful. You're still keeping your hand in things, but you're on a cruise ship for 4.5 months. Did you watch sports? Was the urge there to do some work when it came to sports?
No.
Okay.
No. To do work, no.
But you still watched?
But I watched. They had the TV within the ship picked up all of the NFL postseason games. So I got to see the Eagles game against the 49ers. And then on Super Bowl Sunday, even though only half the people on the ship were American, they made it a big party day. They had, a big room with a big screen, and they had food and drinks and everything. And so I got to see the Super Bowl there. Not much of a game actually, but
right.
it was a fun day. But the idea of actually the closest I came to working was the cruise director found out kind of who I was and what I did, and asked if I could prepare a Super Bowl trivia quiz for Super Bowl Sunday. So I made up a list of like 15 questions and all the different people on the cruise tried to fill it out, and the winner got like a coffee mug or something.
So even on the other side of the world, people still know who Ray Didinger is.
It got out, yeah. It took about a month, but yeah. Somebody, I guess the guys on WIP were talking about
They
the
were
fact.
talking about it, yeah.
Okay. So they were talking about the fact that I was on this 4.5-month cruise, and some people had some friends who they also knew were taking a cruise that sounded like that. And they got in touch with them and said, hey, is there a guy on your cruise ship named such and such? And so I had a few Philly sports T-shirts that I was wearing around the ship, and some people kind of put two and two together and figured out who I was.
Right. Well, okay, let's go back to the beginning. When did you know that you wanted to cover sports for a living? Was it when you were a kid?
Yes, and I mean a little kid. I mean, by the time when I was in grammar school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I had a nun in 5th grade named Sister Claire Ursula. And one day in class, she assigned, 5th grade now, she assigned us to do an essay in class on the person I most admire.
Okay.
And so it was a classroom exercise. I just wrote out my thing, like everybody else turned it in. And the next day, Sister Claire came back in with all the papers graded and everything. And she said, before I pass out the papers, I want to read one that one of your classmates wrote. I want to read it to the rest of the class. And she started reading this essay, and I'm sitting there, and I realized, hey, that's mine. And she got to the very end of it, and she said, This essay was written by Raymond Didinger, and I was sitting sort of right in front of her, and she looked me in the eye and she said, "Mr. Didinger, you should be a writer." And it was the first time in my life anybody ever told me I was good at something. And I just thought, well, if Sister Claire says it, it must be true. And so from that point on, and writing was something I did like. I did enjoy it. I was an only child, so there was a lot of alone time. I just thought, okay, if writing's something I can do, and sports is something I truly love, which I did, I guess the perfect life for me would be to find a way to put the two of them together.
Combine the two, yeah.
And I was lucky enough that we were able to make that happen.
Do you remember who you wrote about, the person you admired the most?
My father.
Your father. Okay.
My
I
father.
love that. He must have loved that.
Yeah, I never told him.
Okay. So
I never told him that story until years and years and years later.
did you ever meet up with that nun after the fact, after you got into the media?
Yeah, I had her again in 7th grade. I had her in 5th grade and 7th grade. She was really tough, but she was a great teacher. And she saw something in my writing that she thought should be developed. And it was really, you know, when you're 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, you have no idea what you want to do. But to have somebody give you some idea of what you can do,
Right.
it helps.
Well, she had
I knew. Look, I thought writing was by the time I got to high school, I definitely knew that was what I wanted to do. But are you going to be lucky enough to get that opportunity? Are you going to be lucky enough to get a job writing about sports? There aren't that many of them. You know, you kind of have to be a little lucky to get your foot in the door. But I knew writing in one form or another was probably going to be my life.
So how did you get your foot in the door? How did it all start for you?
When I graduated from Temple in '68, there weren't a whole lot of jobs, but the Delaware County Daily Times, which still publishes,
Right.
They were advertising for a reporter. So I went there and I interviewed for the job, and the editor, a gentleman named Arthur Mayu, said, I see you're probably interested in sports writing. I said, yeah. And he said, well, we don't have an opening in sports. He said, the opening we have is on news side. We're looking for a news reporter. Would you be interested in coming and work here as a news reporter? And, you know, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it was, you know, the opportunity to get in the business.
Sure.
So I said, sure, okay. And I spent 1 year at the Delaware County Daily Times covering all the news, all the crime stuff in Chester, all the court cases out at the media courthouse. And actually, when I look back on it, it was probably a very, very valuable year because I really learned how to be a reporter. You know, if I had been covering sports, it would have just been a matter of going to games. And there's reporting there, but to work on news side and to try and dig stories out of media courthouse, or to try and go out to Harrisburg to cover a SEPTA shutdown or a teacher's strike. I mean, all of those real kind of nitty-gritty stories.
Yeah.
You got to really be a reporter to go out and do them. So I really learned a lot about the business of reporting that 1 year at the Delco Times. Then 1 year after that, the Philadelphia Bulletin, the late Philadelphia Bulletin, sports editor called and offered me the job as the high school to come and cover high school sports because the guy who had been doing it for 40 years retired. And Jack Wilson, who was the sports editor, contacted me and said, would you be interested in coming to the Bulletin and covering high school sports? So I did. Spent 1 year covering high school sports, 1969. And then the next year, the gentleman who had been covering the Eagles for like 40 years, he retired. And Jack gave me the Eagles beat, so that was 1970, and I've been writing about pro football ever since.
See, it's amazing how things start. And I think that's a great lesson that you take a job, even though it wasn't your ideal situation, the job with the Delco Times, covering crime, covering news. I mean, we see interns all the time here that they want their ideal job, but sometimes you have to go where the gig is, right?
Yeah, you got to be patient. But it really is an education. As it turned out, that year was a very good year to be working on the news side at the Delco Times because 1968 was a presidential election year.
Right.
And so all of the presidential candidates came through Delaware County. I mean, I got to interview Richard Nixon. I got to interview Hubert Humphrey. I got to interview a legitimate third-party candidate in George Wallace.
Wow.
I got to interview all these people, and here I am. I'm just weeks out of college, but I'm right in the middle of a presidential election.
I
So
love it.
The timing of it was really good, and the experience was invaluable.
That's how it all began. All right, we're going to pause here, take our first break. Coming up, we'll talk more about Ray's great newspaper career. We'll get into radio and TV as well. All that and more next on Legends of Philly. Stay with us. And welcome back to Legends of Philly on PHL 17 Plus. I'm Jason. I don't have to tell you who this guy is. The great Ray Didinger is my guest on this episode of the show. We're talking about Ray's newspaper career. We hit the Delco Times. We hit the Bulletin. Got to talk about the Philadelphia Daily News because as a kid, I used to love reading the Daily News because that was an all-star lineup of writers. Guys like you and Stan Hochman and Bill Conlon and Phil Jasner and Bill Fleischman. All these names popping back into my head. I mean, that really was a great lineup of writers, and that sports staff was just stellar. It was amazing.
It was the best. And I say that with total honesty. It was the best. I mean, there was, in every sports hall of fame, there is a category for writers. And everybody that was covering a sport for the Philadelphia Daily News is in that sports hall of fame. They have, every sports hall of fame has writers category, and there's somebody from the Philadelphia Daily News in there. Stan Hochman is in for horse racing.
I did not know that.
Bill Conlon is, and Paul Hagen are in for baseball.
I forgot Paul Hagen. How could I forget about him, right?
And and you've got Dick Weiss and Phil Jasner are in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Jay Greenberg is in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was great too.
All those, Bernard Fernandez, Elmer Smith, Tom Cushman are all in the Boxing Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a staff of Hall of Famers that were all writing for that paper at the same time, and it was a great experience. It was a great learning experience for me. I mean, I had worked at the Philadelphia Bulletin for 12 years. But when I went to the Daily News, when the Daily News hired me, when the Bulletin was sort of on the wane, I went to the Daily News, and it was great because it was really competitive. I mean, you knew you were in with the best people, and you always wanted to. You knew where the standard was. You knew where Stan Hochman and Bill Conlon and Tom Cushman and John Schulian and Mark Wicker, where they set the bar.
That's another one, yeah.
Where they set the bar.
Wow.
And every day that was the bar you had to clear. And it was really, it was a great place to work. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And I remember there's a gentleman named Bob Ryan who writes for the Boston Globe.
Sure.
Well known.
Yep.
And the Boston Globe sports section is really good and has been good for a long time. And one year at the World Series, and I remember it was 1983, Orioles, Phillies.
Phillies, sure.
And so we're there standing around the batting cage one day, and I say to Bob Ryan, I said, Boston Globe, I said, you guys have a great sports section. And Bob Ryan, who was very proud of being a Boston Globe guy and would let you know how proud he was, said, yeah, we're good, but you guys are better.
Wow.
That
says a lot.
I never forget that because Bob Ryan was very proud. He wore that Boston Globe logo on his chest.
Sure.
But in all honesty, he said, yeah, we're good, but you guys are better. And I think we were.
And just talking about the heyday of the Daily News sports section, it makes me think of how newspapers have evolved. And it's a shame to see what's happened to newspapers. I mean, look, I know a lot of it, went to online, but I'm kind of old-fashioned in that I like holding a paper.
Sure.
I like getting the black ink on my fingers. My wife doesn't like it because then I get fingerprints everywhere. But I love holding a newspaper.
Sure. I do too. I mean, I know everything else is out there. You can access anything on the internet. I know that, and I do it. But to me, I would much rather have a newspaper in my hand. And, to see what's happened to the newspaper industry now, to see what's happened here in Philadelphia, where the Inquirer and the Daily News are basically one paper.
It's the same thing, yeah.
It's very hard for me. And I just think that the fans, the readers, are losing out because when I was in the business, the Inquirer and the Daily News, we had the same ownership.
Right.
We were owned by the same people, but we were totally independent staffs, and we were competitive.
Oh, yeah.
We were on the same team, sort of, but not in the news gathering
Listen, the
business.
Inquirer had some big names too. Yeah, Jason Stark and Angelo Cataldi was there for a while. Al Morgani, all the Glenn Macnow, your former radio partner,
Yep.
which actually kind of segues into radio. So you and Glenn do a show on WIP on Saturday mornings for how long?
21 years we did that show
21 years.
together.
And this is not to disrespect the rest of the shows or the rest of the schedule on WIP, but Saturday midday was different. There was just something different about Saturday midday. And again, no disrespect to the rest, but it was
Right.
more intelligent sports talk. And I guess that's what you and Glenn were going for, to be different than the rest of the week.
Yeah, we were different, and we knew we were going to be different, and the station was okay with that. We were just we didn't purport to be radio guys. We were what we were. We were reporters, and we came on the air and we just gave our opinion, and we weren't into what is now commonly referred to as quote unquote hot takes.
Right.
We had them. We had our opinions, but that wasn't what we were going for. We weren't going to stir the pot. We weren't going for clickbait. We were just offering honest opinions on a wide variety of subjects. I mean, we talked about other stuff that was going on too, and it was a very different kind of show. A lot of it was driven by Glenn, who I thought was a master programmer. I mean, he brought elements into the show like what we're watching. He said, why don't we do a segment each week about something that we're watching? You can talk about movies, I'll talk about TV shows, and we'll just do a review about something we saw that week. I said, Glenn, it's a sports station. Are people going to like it? Let's just try it. That was what he would always say. He would, let's just try it.
Right.
And it turned out that people loved it.
Yeah.
And he also, during the pandemic, when sports went away and we still had 3 hours to fill with no sports to talk about, okay, what are we going to talk about? And Glenn came up with the idea of doing a 1 hour long form interview with somebody and call it Tell Us Your Story.
I used to love that.
Yeah, and I said, sounds good to me. And so we went with it, and it became so popular that when sports did come back, people were calling the station and sending us emails and stuff saying, you are going to continue Tell Us Your Story, right? Because people really, really liked it, because there isn't that much of that on radio anymore. The long-form interview has kind of gone the way of the newspaper. There's just not that much of it. So when people got an opportunity to hear it again, to hear Jay Wright for 1 hour just tell you his life story, to hear George Foreman tell you his life story, to hear Bobby Clark, who never said a word when he was a player. We'll talk about tight-lipped.
Yeah, right.
To hear him talk about what it was like to be a kid growing up in Flin Flon, Manitoba, was fascinating stuff.
Let me ask you this. We have about a minute before we have to take another break. But what was great about you and Glenn, and it's not a very easy thing to do, even in talk radio, it's not easy to make a personal connection with listeners. You and Glenn did that very well. What was your secret to that?
Because we were just talking. And I think that I didn't realize how much we had connected with our listeners until I retired. When I announced I was retiring and stepping away, the mail that I got from people I had never met, but felt like by listening to the show for 21 years, we were part of their Saturdays. We were kind of at the breakfast table with them every Saturday for 20 years. And they knew the names of Glenn's kids. They knew the names of my grandchildren. They knew where we went to school. They knew what we liked for dinner. They knew what movies we liked and didn't like. We're part of this extended family that I never realized until the end. I understand it now, and I think it's a wonderful thing. But at the time, I never really thought about it. But it's a very real thing. I mean, the way they reached out to me when I said I was walking away was far beyond what I ever imagined it to be.
Really? You didn't expect that?
No, not at all. I thought it would be, hey, it was fun. We enjoyed listening to you. Goodbye. And it wasn't. People still stop me on the street and talk about, oh, I remember Eagles post-game live when you did this. I remember you. Oh, I'll never forget the day you hugged your son after the Super Bowl. I mean, all of that stuff. Jason, it still comes back to me.
Well, it's funny you mention that because it's going to come back to you again. I want to talk about post-game live. I want to talk about the hug with your son and another moment that you did on TV surrounding the Eagles right before their first Super Bowl win. We'll talk about that and much more next on Legends of Philly with this guy, Ray Didinger, on PHL 17 Plus. Stay with us. And welcome back to Legends of Philly on PHL 17 Plus. I'm Jason Lee. My guest, the great Ray Didinger, and we just determined that we're going to do a second show because, Ray, we're 2 segments down, 1 segment to go, and there's still so much to talk about. You've done so much. We got a lot to talk about.
That's fine.
So I appreciate you hanging in. We'll do this again next week. But one more segment for this show. And before the break, you mentioned the hug with your son that all of Philadelphia watched on Postgame Live after the Eagles won Super Bowl 52. And you said you still hear about it, and for good reason. It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and totally spontaneous. My son, I guess most people know by now, is a cameraman for NFL Films.
Yes.
And he was shooting that game, and in fact, he was shooting the Nick Foles wiring. So that wonderful piece of footage that everyone has seen 1,000 times by now of Nick Foles talking to Doug Peterson on the sideline.
When he said, "You want Philly, Philly?"
You want Philly, Philly.
Your son shot that.
That's my son's shot.
No way.
That's my son's shot.
Wow.
So, and I tell that story a lot because I'm really proud of it.
That's awesome.
And so he had said to me before the game, he said, if the Eagles win this game, I'm going to find you and give you a hug, is what he said. And, of course, he grew up in the city, and he's a big Eagles fan, and I grew up with the team. So, yeah, it was a big moment. But I figured at the end of a Super Bowl, I mean, everybody knows what the end of a Super Bowl looks like. It's utter chaos. Okay, so what are the chances of him? First of all, he has to continue shooting through the post-game ceremony and all that stuff, and then break down his equipment and then go find me. What are the chances? Well, he did. And we were in the middle of the post-game show with Michael Barkan, Seth Joyner, Barrett Brooks, and the governor, Rendell. And I saw the door of our broadcast location open, and my son walked in. And I said to Michael during a break, I said, I'd like to give my son a hug. And Michael said, oh. And he just as we were coming back on, he waved my son on, which I didn't really want him to do because I wanted to hug my son, but I didn't want to do it on live television.
Yeah, but Barkan knows what makes great television.
Michael
he does.
Understands what makes a good live TV, and he knew a good moment when he saw one. And so he waved my son onto the set, and we had our hug. And I said to my son as I was hugging him, I said, that was for Grandmom and Grandpop, meaning his grandmother and grandfather. And when I said that, I started to cry. I was a little embarrassed because I had been doing the Eagles postgame live for 20 years. And I had always sort of prided myself in being the objective analyst, not getting emotionally caught up in the wins and the losses, kind of trying to be above all that. But that day, there was no getting around it. I mean, I just got.
You're a fan.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and that part of me came out.
Yeah.
And but knowing it was coming out on live television I was very uncomfortable with it. But Governor Rendell said to me when we went to the next break, he said, "Listen," he said, I know how you're feeling about that." He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "Because that moment you were having with your son," he said, "that's happening all over Philadelphia."
Yep.
Fathers are hugging sons, sons are hugging grandfathers.
I was just going to say that.
Mothers are hugging their daughters. That's what you expressed there was what all of Philadelphia is experiencing. Believe me, they will get it. And they did.
The governor was exactly right, because after that game, and it's a moment I'll never forget, because like you and like your son, I thought for years, I'm never going to see this happen.
Sure.
I'm never going to see the Eagles win the Super Bowl. I grew up in this town just like you did, just like your son did. So after the game, I hugged my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a moment, I'm going to get emotional. It's a moment I'll never forget.
Oh, sure.
And, because my dad's going to be 83 this year. And one day when he's not here, I'm going to have that moment. I will never forget that moment. And the fact that it happened on live television with your son, I mean, you've got video of that.
Yeah.
How great is that?
Yeah, I know. And it's been played a lot. Sam Katz, the documentary filmmaker, just made a film about the Tommy McDonald story in me called Boys to Fame. And that whole thing with my son plays as part of that story. I understand the arc of my connection with the Eagles. I mean, it started when I was an 8-year-old boy going to Eagles training camp with my mother and father, and adopting Tommy McDonald as my hero. And so I've had a long, long history with this team, and I've been through some lean times, and I've also been there for the glory times. And it will never, ever get better than it did Super Bowl 52. That day, that moment with my son was about as good as it gets, I think.
Well, you know what? I think that's a great point to end show number 1 with you, Mr. Didinger. I appreciate that. You mentioned Tommy McDonald. That's one of the many subjects we didn't get to. We will get to Ray's relationship with Tommy, how that evolved into the play Tommy and Me. We'll talk about more Eagle stuff and, of course, the other sports you covered as well. All that and more next week with Ray Didinger. But for now, thank you for watching this episode of Legends of Philly, and we'll catch you next time.